What if you could lead more effectively and go home on time? Welcome to the Lightbulb. I'm Zoe Thompson, leadership and performance coach, and each week I bring you 3 practical insights from my work helping impact-driven leaders transform from reactive to intentional leadership so they can finish work on time and take guilt-free time off, creating success that feels as good as it looks. Let's jump in. Okay, episode 39. I've just got back from volunteering with Community of Purpose, which is a charity in Bristol. If you've been here a little while, you've probably heard me talk about them. I step in when I can. I get involved in a couple of ways. You may well have heard me talk about the Bristol Young Heroes Awards, the Purposeful Pathways programme, and then today their Break Free programme, which is the programme that they run in the summer. It's a great way for the kids to have day trips, get breakfast and lunch when they're not in school. And it gives me the opportunity to entertain my inner child. So I've been out this morning, laser quest and crazy golf, which has been good fun and a nice way to get out of the office for the day, do something a little bit of fun and get to know some young people that I'll potentially work with in the future. Whilst I work with you as leaders and in organizations with leaders, I also do some work with young people with self-leadership. So that's what I've been up to. Yeah, it's been a good day. So my 3 light bulbs this week come from both one-to-one clients and workshops. And also this week I did a fireside chat and I love doing these. So if there's an opportunity for me to come in and do one of these in your workplace, let me know, because I love to do them. And it's a great way to be able to shape the conversation in a way that works for people. People can ask live questions and I can answer them, which makes it a little bit more dynamic than a workshop or a lunch and learn. It also means that the people who are dialing in can ask questions so people get what they want from that time. Yeah, I had a great conversation this week for a company called Thriveology, who are a third-party wellbeing provider. They provide myself and lots of other experts into organizations to support personal development and with wellbeing being the golden thread. So I'm going to talk about that in this week's light bulbs as well. The first one I want to talk about was the topic for the 3rd module of the Leadership Development Programme. So this is a programme that I am delivering for Breast Cancer UK, really enjoying delivering it for their leaders. It's also going to be launched as an open programme. It's in testing at the moment. So I've had a couple of volunteers to come in and test the content. Module 3 is focusing in on confidence and imposter syndrome. Module 1, we looked at a leader they want to be. In Module 2, we've looked at how they want to evolve into that leader. And so for Module 3, we're looking at the confidence to be able to do that. I recorded the module this week for them so that they can focus on that content for this next month. And imposter syndrome is one of those labels, for want of a better word, that gets used quite often. I'll quite often hear people tell me that they've got imposter syndrome. And I always ask what that means to them because different people interpret it in different ways. Now, when we look at the dictionary definition, it is a persistent and internalized fear of being exposed as a fraud. Quite often, what people are referring to is the feeling that people feel when they step outside of their comfort zone. And that is a very natural feeling that people experience when they're doing something new. And it's a very natural question to ask whether or not you're ready, whether or not you're prepared, whether or not you're good enough to be doing it. It's very different to imposter syndrome, where there is a persistent and internalized fear. It doesn't happen around specific events. It happens all the time. It's an all-consuming thought process which has a very strong emotional response. It also means that people don't talk about it because their fear is being found out. So they don't talk about this fear that they're not good enough. And it's such an interesting topic because one of the things that I often talk about with people is actually, for a lot of people who describe it, it's not that they think that people overestimate them. It's more that they have underestimated themselves. And that's quite often down to their level of self-awareness in looking at the gap between where they are and where they want to be and focusing on the gap rather than focusing on what they already have and what they already bring to the table or bring into this experience. So it's often a good sign. It's a sign that you're pushing outside of your comfort zone. It's also a sign that you have a good level of awareness, which means you're not going to be complacent. You're not going to just show up and expect that things will go well. It's not evidence that you're not good enough or that you're in the wrong place. It's evidence that you actually care quite deeply. You've got that professional pride. You've got high standards, but you do have enough self-awareness to question yourself. And if we're being totally honest, I think we probably all work with people, and in particular in leadership, where we would love to see them have more self-awareness and perhaps have a little more self-doubt or a bit of a reality check as to what they are capable of. When it comes to the research, it was research that was completed with 150 highly successful women. And we know that it does show up in high achievers. We know that it can show up in very competitive environments. Now, whilst the research was done for women, we know that this is not something that only those who identify as women experience. We also know that actually it is very high in people who come from underrepresented backgrounds, those who have protected characteristics, because often they look around the room and they don't see other people who look like them. They don't see other people who they identify with. And that is often compounded by the fact that with the best of intentions, organizations will try to support those who are underrepresented to have the opportunity for those roles. The downside of that is often people are very negative and very vocal about how people have earned that place at the table. And so that often means then that people feel that they have to overperform to prove that they have every right to be there and that they have earned their place to be there. Now, this may not impact you. However, it may impact one of your team, maybe more than one of your teams. It's good to have this awareness that actually this can be how it shows up. And that awareness for you as a leader is as important for your team as it is for yourself. One of the things that I covered in the workshop was recognition that when you're stepping outside of your comfort zone, it will feel uncomfortable. You will have self-doubt, but until you seize those opportunities, until you have the courage to step out of your comfort zone and try new things, you're never going to create the evidence base that tells you that you have the confidence to do these things, and the comfort zone doesn't grow. And in the same way, if this doesn't impact you, but it does impact one of your team, it is worth thinking about how you can have these conversations to support that member of your team. And especially if you're hearing your team talking about imposter syndrome, of offering them that space, that opportunity to share how they feel and to acknowledge how they feel and support how they can shift those feelings and check in with what is true and check in with how they can move through this in a way that they still seize those opportunities, they still take action, and that they start to increase their confidence. So that was Lightbulb 1, and that in itself is a huge topic. The workshop was like 45 minutes, and in fact, those of you who are on the leadership community, there is a full workshop in the leadership resource library that you can go and check out if this resonates with you. If you're not in the community and you want to find out more, then pop me a message and let me know, or head to the website and you'll see the details in there. On to Lightbulb 2, talking delegation. And, this will keep coming up in different ways because it is one of the biggest challenges that a lot of leaders have. This came up in one of the group calls because we were talking about that need as a leader to want to protect your staff, and knowing when your team is really busy that you want to hold on to things that need to be done rather than risk overloading and overwhelming individuals on your team. Now, in the discussion, we were talking about when to delegate and when to keep the tasks for yourself. And interestingly, what somebody shared was that actually they had held on to it, and it was their line manager who had spotted that they hadn't delegated it. And rather than hand it over, they'd kind of quietly got it done themselves, and their manager was asking why that had happened. And in response to that, they'd said that, they didn't want to feel guilty about adding to the stress of their team, because they feel that their responsibility as a leader is to protect them from that. And they're not wrong. But what we don't want to do is assume the capacity that other people have, and we don't want to assume that this wouldn't be a great opportunity for them. And actually, even if they are near capacity, if this is a great opportunity for them, they might want to deprioritize something else to give them the opportunity to be able to do this. And so we need to be able to have that conversation with them and not assume and make the decision for them. This is the autonomy of giving them that information and allowing them to make an informed decision. The other thing to think about is that you are already able to do that task. So you are learning nothing from doing that task, yet you are taking away the opportunity for somebody else to learn when you do that task yourself. Now, it might be that this is not the right time for somebody else to try and learn how to do something. It might also be exactly the right time for this person to do something. And unless we have that conversation, we don't know. We're assuming, and potentially we're withholding a task, also withholding the opportunity. We need to have the conversation. Ultimately, we do not want to assume. We need to have that conversation. We need to ask those questions, and we need to invite that individual to make that decision as to how they want to move things forward. Do they want to take on a new task, or is the timing not right? And it's something that you can take into consideration for another time. If you are absorbing that task, you're absorbing that workload without having that conversation with them, then you are robbing them of the chance to build that capability, to develop the knowledge, to develop the skills, to experience what will help them to be able to increase their ability and their capability, not just in the role that they're in, but in future roles as well. If this resonates with you, it's worth thinking about the bigger picture. As hard as that is in the moment, this is the difference between the reactive leadership, where you make a very fast decision, you understand that everybody is busy, and so you hold on to that yourself, versus the intentional leadership of taking a step back, looking at where this might be an opportunity, looking at where this is a chance for them to develop their knowledge, their skills, their experience, and where you might need to have that conversation to understand so that they can make that decision. What information does that individual need to help them to make an informed decision about whether or not they take that task on? And it is not always your decision to make. Sometimes it's a conversation to see how they want to be able to move it forward, rather than you just assuming that they don't have capacity, that they would rather you just get on with it, because they are potentially missing out here. And although you've done this with the best of intentions, it might be that for them, they would have loved that opportunity to be able to develop and evolve, and that they would have deprioritized something else to be able to do that. And thirdly, the third light bulb, talking about one-to-ones. Now, I think at the moment, one-to-ones, with everything that's going on, with changes in the workplace, changes with technology, changes in the way people are working, I believe that one-to-ones are so much more important now, that more so than they have ever been, because that is the time where we sit human to human. We can ask questions, we can hold space, we can listen, we can understand, and we create that engagement. One-to-ones are not necessarily something that people are learning as part of their leadership training. And there is such a varied way of holding those one-to-ones. It's always interesting to hear from the leaders that I work with how they approach those one-to-ones and how they plan to get the best out of them, if they plan at all. One-to-ones need to be a priority. It should be the absolute last thing you move in your calendar, because the message that is received is that they are not important, that something else became more important than them. So time in the calendar needs to be protected. It also needs to be planned in. But then how you hold that one-to-one is really important. The conversation that came up in the fireside chat, I was asked, how do I help leaders with their one-to-ones? Now, firstly, it's going to be one of the workshops in the community, because it's definitely something that people are looking for more skills with. And secondly, in coaching sessions, exploring how leaders want to hold their one-to-ones, but also what do their team need? Now, I do think it's a two-way process. I do think that as a leader, it is your responsibility to make sure that your team have time in the calendar, that they have your full and undivided time in that one-to-one, and also that you give them permission to make the best use of that hour with what they need. Now, it might be that you set a loose agenda so that you cover the tactical elements, but also protecting time for their personal development elements. It's also important that they bring to you what they want to talk about in the one-to-one. You protect the hour. You hold that space, you give them your undivided attention, they bring in what it is they want to talk about. And in the same way, when you go for your one-to-ones with your line manager, you have an agenda, you have an outcome, you have what it is that you want to share and what it is you want to walk out of that room with. Unless people are asked, most people come in and wait for you to lead that conversation. It becomes much more passive for them. It's much more reactive as well. So especially if you are not having a lot of time to plan for those one-to-ones, and then they don't bring anything either, it quite often means that nothing really gets talked about, nothing really gets shared, and therefore nothing really moves forward. Having a loose agenda to say, right, we need to talk about the tactical updates so that I can support you with your tasks and activities. And then the second half of the one-to-one will be an opportunity to talk about your personal development. You're sharing in advance that that is how you plan to hold that time, but also sharing with them that you expect them to come into the room with what it is that they want you to know. They need you to know so that you can support them, and that they are thinking about their own development. And whether that's a horizontal development of staying in the role that they're in, but perhaps learning more skills or having more opportunities where they are, or whether they've got ambitions to go into new roles or be promoted. We know that the research tells us that people need to feel valued, they need to feel that their contribution is valued, and they need to have those progression opportunities. They need to know that their opportunity to develop is there. And the one-to-one is the ideal place for those conversations to happen. You need to be intentional about creating and holding the space for them. And they need to know what it is that they want to talk about. They need to prepare for those one-to-ones so that they get the best use of that time with you. There's a couple of things there for you as a leader in terms of your own planning, and also how you communicate that with the individuals. How do you help them to prepare so that they are coming into the room ready to have that conversation, knowing exactly what it is that they want to walk away with? And in the same way, when you're preparing for your one-to-ones with your manager, what conversations do you want to have? What do you want to walk away with from that conversation? So those are my 3 light bulbs for this week. Take those light bulbs and turn them into action so that you take the learning, take it away and do something different. Remember, keep it small, keep it simple, keep it specific. How in the next week can you change how you lead with what you've heard today? As always, feel free to reach out. It's always great when people pop me a message and let me know what they've changed and what they're doing differently. And I'll be back next week with the next episode. And those are your 3 takeaways for this week. Before you go, ask yourself, what's my light bulb moment from this? And now that I know what I know, what will I do differently? Choose one action, however small, and commit to it. That's how overwhelmed and reactive becomes aligned and intentional. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next week on the next episode of The Lightbulb.